Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Liza is a certified pediatric sleep consultant through the Center for Pediatric Sleep Management and the co-founding director of the Westchester Mama and Child Wellness Expo. She's also the sleep expert in the Indie Labs Parenting Center and the sleep health expert with Tinto app. Liza has helped hundreds of families achieve better continuous sleep through her family-first approach, working with clients one-on-one through the process of teaching healthy, independent sleep habits for children from birth through age 8. In person and virtually, Liza teaches newborn sleep health classes, leads healthy sleep habit workshops, and has a background of 15 years in children's book publishing. A special needs mom of 2, Liza lives with her family in New York. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to discuss floor beds, which I feel like has been such a hot topic in like every single Facebook mom group that I've been in recently. So maybe it's like a big fad that's going on. Have you noticed the same thing?
Yeah, I've definitely seen many more people commenting on it at a younger age
Mm-hmm.
than I like would ever expect to think a parent would be interested in that option. So
Right.
that's sort of what pulls my eye about it. I actually had a call with a prospective client, I want to say like a week or so ago, and the call began. She was like, I just want to let you know, I don't think I really want to sleep train, but I decided to have this call because I had worked with her friend and it had gone really well. And she had an 8-month-old who they were co-sleeping with, and she wanted to move her to a floor bed and didn't
Mm,
even have a crib set up. And so I was very honest about explaining the benefits of a crib for an infant and really for any
right.
child who's not yet climbing out of the crib and is
Yep.
under the age of 3. And it's a really personal decision. So, I understand feeling like you are the expert on your baby
Right.
completely. And safe sleep to me is one of the most important things that I educate parents on. And many of them already know. So, you choose to do with the information what you will.
Right.
Um, but yeah, floor beds are really not something that I am comfortable recommending to a client, even if they have a child who's in their own room and ready for a toddler bed, then I think the floor bed is a great option.
Yes.
If you're concerned that they're going to fall out or that it's going to be tricky for them to climb back in themselves, that's great. But the, an infant slash toddler brain is not capable developmentally of understanding the invisible boundary that comes with a floor bed or a toddler bed or even like a twin bed, whatever,
Yeah.
until at least 24 months. So putting a younger baby on a floor bed when they're, physically developing, they're figuring out how to be mobile is just really, really tricky and does not usually lead to the best sleep for anyone in the house.
Right.
Babies, in the same way that like toddlers need boundaries and we all need limits to, feel comfortable and secure. That is the benefit of being in a crib. It is that physical security that your baby is not going to roll out or, try to crawl away. And
Right. Right. I think that's so huge. I think that the big point that you brought up and that I totally agree with is the idea that like if your child's going to be in some type of true bed or toddler bed or whatever type of bed and not in a crib, and they've aged out of this crib idea, like a floor bed
Mhm.
is a great idea. And it's very like cool understanding like the Montessori background to it is pretty cool and exploratory for children, which can be really great for building trust and building, confidence in children. But the idea that we're putting infants and young toddlers onto these floor beds can become a very like big hazard. And I mean, even when I'm switching clients and helping them transition from cribs to bed with their little ones,
Mhm.
like one of the things that I bring up with them is a lot about like safety proofing the whole room. And that's something that people don't truly think about all of the aspects too. Um, you know, when a kiddo's in a crib, like you said, they have these boundaries, right? So like we know we don't put pillows and blankets and things like that in there, like you're safety proofing that crib. But when there's no crib walls and they can move around the room, the entire room becomes their crib, right? Like
Yes,
there's so many things
absolutely.
we have to safety proof.
I completely agree. And I think you're right that that's not something that parents are thinking about because it's just it's one of those like invisible barriers, right? But you need to secure all of the furniture that you have. You need to make sure all of the cords are out of the way, that there are no open outlets. And if there are blinds with, a string hanging down, all of these things can become such big safety risks, especially if you have a child who is, not old enough to really understand why they are not allowed to touch those things or what is
Right.
a toy and what's not a toy because it's all going to look like playthings
Right.
to a young baby. And yeah, I can't emphasize enough how the crib to me it was like it was a big security and like safe haven for me as a parent. I felt safe knowing my kids were sleeping in cribs. Once we transitioned to toddler beds, I felt my own anxiety rise because I was like, I know they can get out. Do they know they can get out?
Right.
And it takes a lot of communication around what that responsibility looks like for a child who is just, exploring so much and learning more and more about their autonomy and also going through other struggles with separation, which is we know is really, really common in those toddler years. So if your little one doesn't want to be away from you and they're able to get out, we see so much bedtime stalling and overnight wake ups and parents can really fall into patterns that they don't want to be in where they might end up sleeping on their child's floor or lying with them until they fall asleep and I don't know if you see a lot of families with those issues, but I do see a lot of toddlers who struggle with that transition and that's when families reach out to me and they will say like we sleep trained at 6 months. He was a great sleeper in the crib and now we have a toddler bed and all bets are off and we do not know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's just this idea that when they're on some type of a floor bed, whether it's like at their age appropriate time or not, there is just this like pull of the child typically at that age being very codependent on parents and wanting the parents there. And it's so much
Mhm.
easier to fall into that new routine and habit of being in the room with your child when they're not in a crib. Um, and I do think that's probably why a lot of parents are interested in this whole floor bed idea as infants, is the idea that instead of being stuck in, a rocking chair holding their baby all night, they have this mattress that feels safer than putting them in their parent bed, but that they can both like lie down and rest. And to that, I totally understand, right? Like the sleep deprivation is so real, but at the same time, like there are many other options and like avenues of navigating sleep struggles. So it can be still just as much of a hazard and a risk, sleeping on a floor bed with your infant than it would be if you were co-sleeping with your infant in your own bed, right?
Absolutely. And again, I just think as soon as your baby is mobile, you're sort of moving, like there are just that many more transitions because that's
Right.
not expecting a baby who is learning to or just trying to crawl and getting up on all fours, expecting them to stay on their floor bed because you have said it's nap time or you have said it's bedtime. I just don't think it's not developmentally appropriate
I was
to
gonna say it's
expect
not age
that of them.
appropriate. Yeah.
No, they're not capable of that kind of um like behavior and logic at that age. And we
Hmm.
don't want to set them up for failure, you know?
Absolutely. It takes me back to my daycare days because like talking about this, I can just envision like even when I was in the infant room, but also the toddler rooms, and then like all the way up of in daycares during nap time, we have these cots or, mats that it depends on the classroom that children
Mhm.
would lie on. And it just takes me back to the amount of times that when we switch infants from cribs to mats on the floor to prepare them for the toddler classrooms, we would sit with them and rub their backs while they were on the mats. But the second that you think they were asleep and you'd like move your hand and like get up to go do something else, you'd turn around and they'd get right off the mat because they have no idea. Like no
Right.
child understands like that that's where they have to be. And like of all places, a daycare would be one that you think your child would follow up because so many children do the whole like monkey see, monkey do kind of a thing. So like
Absolutely.
if all my friends are laying on their mats, I probably know I should. But like if I don't understand in that situation that I should, I absolutely am going to push my boundaries with my parents when I'm on my floor bed at home, right? Um,
Absolutely.
that's what it makes me think of because, oh yeah, I remember the struggle of like, nope, back on your bed. Nope, back on your bed. Um,
Totally. And
and
you're right. Like if you're not following that in a situation where everyone is doing the same thing, then when you are with your most favorite trusted caregivers, of course you're going to push the boundaries because you feel
absolutely.
safest there.
Yep. Yep. Totally. Um, and I love that you mentioned like it's just more like steps, more boundaries to getting them to where they need to be, right? A lot of people will say I'm doing a floor bed because my child is not mobile. And so I know they're not going to roll off or fall or whatever, and it's just more comfortable for me. And to that, okay, sure, they're not mobile, but they're going to be.
Hmm.
And even if they're not mobile, they're looking around and they're seeing the space they're in. So they're becoming comfortable with that floor bed. So when they become mobile, you're either now back to what we were just talking about of getting your child to not move off of this space, which is totally not developmentally appropriate, to, or I should say, or putting them in a crib, which is now a whole another new place that they may not feel comfortable in, that they don't know where they are. Um, and now you've messed with their routine. And as we know, children strive off of routine. So by
Hmm.
switching that up, like you could be totally screwing with their whole sleep like schedule and stuff. And I mean, that gets fixed over time and with routine, but that's still like creating more, road bumps and more sleep struggles than you need.
Right. Just more transitions. And I think
Yeah,
in general, there's like this whole wave now of, very gentle parenting. And I think it's very easy for that to sort of bleed over into permissiveness, where it's like we let
absolutely.
kids lead the way and tell us what they need when. And I really do think that kids, in addition to thriving off of routine, like you said, they feel safest and secure when they know what the limits are. Like
Right.
it's those, I think if kids have too much control, it can end up feeling incredibly overwhelming. And that leads to, behaviors that you might not want to see.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to like emotional regulation, in order to be able to help our kids get to a place of calm, we have to be that leader, right? Like
Hmm.
we have to be calm ourselves. And if we are just letting our kids run the show, I don't think that's setting them up for success in areas beyond sleep. Just like when it comes time to be in a classroom and listen and follow directions and share, and it's just there's so
Absolutely.
many there's so many places in our lives where we just accept that we will need to follow the rules. And I
Right.
really feel like when it comes to sleep, these guidelines exist for a reason.
Yeah. I love in the Center for Pediatric Sleep Management training, and I think Jane, the founders, like talked about it a couple times. She talks about how oftentimes like people have this bad stigma around sleep training, right? But the idea behind it is that we're teaching children a new skill, and
Mhm.
oftentimes they're learning skills that they may or may not want to learn, right? And with sleep training, we think of it as being like, well, people think of it as being like this horrible thing, you're traumatizing your child. And so people with that gentle parenting approach are like, well, I don't want to do that to my child. And I think the big thing that like with what Jane says about it, and similarly to what you just mentioned, is that you're not traumatizing your child. And sometimes there are things that we need to do that we may or may not want to do, right? And as
Mhm.
children, like there are going to be many things in life that they don't understand why we need to do it a certain way or things like that. But there are times when it has to be done specific ways for safety or for whatever it may be. And so I think that the idea behind, teaching your child to sleep in their own bed or not using a floor bed is a safety thing that, whether your child is a huge fan of it or not, like you have to, as a parent, come to the conclusion that this is important to you and important for your child to be safe. And therefore, we're teaching them a new skill and they may not want to learn that new skill right away, but eventually they will click and they'll be like not knowing any better and it'll be their routine.
Right. And I think, you mentioned like they're not always going to want to learn a new skill and not always want to do what is asked of them. But I totally agree with you. Like that is our job to help guide them on what we know is going to be like the safest option or the best thing. And I think there is a lot right now, like the I think a lot of people are also misusing cry it out. I am constantly seeing messages
Absolutely.
and hearing from prospective clients like we tried cry it out for about 20 minutes and I'm like, okay. And then, I will explain what cry it out really is, which is absolutely no intervention. It's not letting your child cry for 20 minutes and then going in. That is, those are time checks. But I do think that in general, um, parents are so uncomfortable with hearing their children cry. And that often does get in the way of setting up any kind of structure or good habits, safe
Yes.
or otherwise, that are actually going to benefit them. And I I feel like one of the things that I really love to talk to families about is just like not all crying is created equal. Like not
Yes.
every cry is a distress cry. And it's, when you have a newborn, it's like it's very similar. You assume that every single cry, at least I did, I assumed that every cry with my newborns was that they were hungry. And it's just like you learn over time
Right.
that your baby might cry because they're hungry, sure, but they're
Mm-hmm.
also going to cry when they're tired. They'll also cry if they are uncomfortable. They might also cry if they are bored. They
Mm-hmm.
might cry, if they're overstimulated. There are so many different reasons. And I think when the goal is to stop the crying, it really becomes much more of a short-term solution than actually getting to the root of what is happening. And
Absolutely.
the example that I always give is that children are going to cry in a variety of situations where we would never even think to change what we're implementing because we believe so strongly that what we're doing is safe. And a
Right.
perfect example of that is like, okay, so let's say your baby is really bothered by being in the car seat. They hate being confined in the car and they just scream. Would you ever take them out of their car seat and let them just like ride without being buckled in or have someone hold them in the front seat instead because they don't like being strapped and facing backward? No, like never. It would never even occur to you. You would
Right.
feel, you would feel bad that your child is upset, but you would understand that the choice you've made to put them in their car seat is ultimately what is best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel about sleep training too. Children do protest what is new and unexpected to them. And so
Yep.
whenever you're implementing any kind of change, until it becomes routine, it is just going to feel confusing and difficult.
Absolutely.
And with time and space, that really does change and the crying stops.
Yeah, I think that's so huge. And I think that's a lot of the reasoning behind why people do this floor bed thing and this gentle parenting thing is, overcorrecting their own childhoods and their own
Mhm.
upbringings and, really trying to tune into their child. But tuning into your child doesn't need to look that way. It doesn't need to be that extreme. You're still going to understand your child and still support them in a manner that's safe and still respecting their boundaries, right?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, like, let's talk about the reasoning behind our worry of an infant in a floor bed. We have this idea that, like a floor bed doesn't have like the child at this age, at this young age, doesn't have the mental capacity to understand the boundaries, right? But what are we talking about when we mean like the safety of a floor bed for an infant is, not safe, right? Like we use cribs for a reason. Do you want to kind of explain what that reasoning is and why we're not doing that with the
Yeah.
floor bed?
Yes. So, I mean, the first and foremost, we want our child to be on a really firm, firm mattress with a flat fitted sheet without any blankets, any kind of bumpers, stuffed animals, pillows, any of that stuff. And crib mattresses are specifically made, they have to adhere to safety guidelines in order to be on the market.
Hmm.
So when you're purchasing either a pack and play or a crib or even a bassinet, they have met the safety standards and
Right.
are approved for infants specifically. And with a floor bed, you could just get any kind of mattress that you want, especially if the goal is for it to make bed sharing safer. Then my guess would be that you might be choosing a mattress that is, primarily intended for older children or adults. And
Absolutely.
so that doesn't mean it's a breathable mattress. It doesn't mean it's firm enough. Um, and there are so many unnecessary risks when it comes to, rebreathing and suffocation if people are sharing a sleep space and if a baby is not on a safe sleep surface, it just can be so detrimental to their health. And for me, uh, you know, that is the most important thing. Like a baby who is crying because they are upset, they're breathing.
Right.
And we know that if they're in the crib, they're in the safest place they can be while they are upset.
Yes.
And I, yeah, there's so many horror stories out there about exhausted parents with the best intentions, and I hate the thought of anyone being in that situation.
Absolutely. I think that you stated it all more perfectly than anything. It really is about doing what you can to keep your child safe. And yeah, I think the stories are scary, but they're true. So, um, you know, going through some type of sleep training or reaching out to a sleep consultant, or, in whatever manner, or just letting your child learn to be in their crib if they're upset. Like, I think, yeah, like you said, that's the safest place for them to be. I often tell like my postpartum families when their babies are crying and they can't figure out why, and then they start getting worked up. I'm like, well, now your baby's worked up because you're worked up. I was like, so go put them down in a safe place, aka a pack and play or a bassinet or a crib, because they can't get into anything. They're safe, and walk away for a minute. Take a deep breath, maybe even like get some cold air on your face, stick your head outside for a second, and then go back to it, right? And a lot of the time, that reset for even the child is really helpful because it's like a setting reset. And so by putting them down, they kind of get more, almost slightly more mad that they're put down, But then when you pick them up, it resets them and they then calm right down because they're happy they're being held again. Whereas, when they're worked up and you're holding them, they freak out. So even in those situations, we're talking about the safest place possible, which is the crib. So if you're gonna go through this sleep training process, which can be a nerve-wracking one for a lot of people, you know,
Absolutely.
by putting a child in a place where you know that they're safe, that's gonna at least alleviate like one of those levels of uncomfortable feelings towards the whole situation and make you feel a little bit more safe about it. So
Yeah.
I think that that's definitely like a really big portion of the floor bed worry. Um, and I love that you were so open to chatting about all of that. Do you have like any other things that you've heard about people like stating why they use floor beds or anything like that? I mean, I've tried to remember all of the things that I normally hear, but
I think for the most part, it isn't even something that people are setting out to do. It seems like it's more often something that happens in response to challenges,
right,
whether that is like a challenge with the crib itself, like parents who have said he hates being in the crib, like the second we put him in the crib,
right.
he screams. But I think, again, if every time your baby screams when you put them in the crib, you take them out immediately, then what they are learning is that the crib is a place to be rescued from rather
Yes.
than a place that they are able to find comfort in if given the opportunity to
I love
try.
that. I
So
love
I
it.
really do think that part of it is like parents who don't feel like they have other options. It's not necessarily something that like they're aspiring to do before your baby even arrives. Like we're going to go right to a floor bed. I think it really is something that parents will do when they feel like they don't want to bed share. But if their child seems really crib averse, then being able to put them on their own sleep surface but still have them close by feels like the best option.
Right.
And again, like I think it works for those families until it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
everything, it's things can be sustainable for as long as you're able to tolerate. And usually there will come a point where it stops working. And that I think is often where families will reach out to us as sleep consultants, like they know how to fall asleep on their own, but all of a sudden they just won't do it.
Yep.
Or, and there's so much developing and development constantly in the first few years that it can be really challenging for parents to feel like every single day is different, or that just when they get the hang of one thing and they think a schedule is quote unquote like set, that their child's needs change, or they're
Yep.
going through a developmental leap and there's more brain activity, or they're trying to roll. And it's just, there's so many things that impact sleep. And if you at least know that your baby is in a safe place, then my hope for a family is that we are setting them up for success. And they might be crying through the process because they don't like what their new situation is and they don't like what is being asked of them. But knowing that you have done your job as a parent to provide a safe space for them to express their discomfort in is hugely important. And that discomfort goes away as we build up their tolerance for it.
Absolutely. I think that's like so true. And it's yeah. I mean, I can't even say it any better. Like it's so true. I think exactly the points that you've made is exactly what I say to people when they come. So I couldn't say it better. I think that knowing that there are other options out there when you feel like your child is opposed to being in a crib is so important to remember. And knowing that that's not your only option. And that's not your only option where, you think that your child's going to just be happy about it because you're right. Like they may be happy about it right away, but they may not like it long term, or, they may start waking up in the middle of the night and realizing you're not there and still hate it.
Mhm.
Um, So I
And
think
it might
it's so
not work for
important.
you as a
Right.
parent. And like just because something is working for your child, if it's not working for you as a parent and it's starting to impact your sleep, which then impacts your mental health, that's not good for the family either. So
Absolutely.
I think it
Absolutely.
really, that connection between sleep and mental health is so important. And I love that you even have this podcast and that there are so many of us now who are trained to support families through these, life stages that can be
Hmm.
really confusing and really overwhelming. And I I wish that more families would take advantage of podcasts and blogs and expert advice instead of spending so much time listening to other parents in Facebook groups,
Yeah.
because that is often like, I'm sure you spend time in Facebook groups. I do too, all the time, looking for ways that I can help and share and identify a problem and suggest a solution. And it's that's actually where I see a lot of suggestions for floor beds come up,
Yeah.
is where a parent is saying they just will not sleep in the crib. And I know, people mean well, but there can also be a lot of invalidating that happens in these groups where the person who is expressing an issue is not looking to be told that they should just like get used to it or get over it or time flies, so cherish these moments. If it's not working for that family, then, just I have such a love-hate relationship with Facebook for that reason.
Yep.
It can be great, but it can be a place of fear mongering and shaming, and that's just, I hate that parents who are seeking support are sometimes met with
Experiencing that.
a lot of pushback. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's so true. The mom shame is like so large in those groups. And then there'll be like the people that are afraid to say, reach out to a sleep consultant or sleep train your baby. And it's people are afraid to even ask about it. And most of the time when I see those posts go up, they're posted anonymously, which makes my heart break even more,
Oh,
you
that's
know?
such an interesting point, right? Like looking for a yeah,
Yeah.
that is so true.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I
I
mean,
hadn't thought about
I
that.
just love that we're able to explain that like there are options out there. And I love that you brought up the point that like there are podcasts, there are experts, there are research information out there that it can be more factual and more truthful than Sally from down the street's opinion and how her baby slept, right? So I think that that's so important to also remember. I love that. Yeah. When we wrap up here, is there anything else that you can think of or want to share with the community? And then if not, do you want to tell everybody kind of where they can find you and what kind of services that you're providing the community with?
Sure. I think the best piece of like general parenting and sleep advice I can give is that there really is no one way to go about any of this. It's so personal to you and your priorities as a parent. And I think if there are no shoulds, other than safe sleep,
Right.
which yes, we want everyone to practice safe sleep. But if you are doing that and something is not working for you, um, my best piece of advice would be to reach out for support and not be afraid to make a change. Because even though it might be hard initially, the long-term benefits of that change are going to make all of the hard work worth it. And if whatever you are doing does feel sustainable for you and your family, then ignore all of the chatter and do what works for you.
Right. Right. I think a well-slept baby is a well-slept parent, but a
Yeah.
well-slept baby is also meaning that you're going to have more patient parents. You're going to have more memory making with your child because not only are you going to be more patient, but your child's going to be happier. And there's so much more that goes to being that goes to having a well-slept baby and a well-slept parent, right? Like it's not just about that sleep, but it's about so much more. Babies develop better, relationships are stronger, and so much more. So I think that that's so true.
Absolutely.
Do you want to let everybody know kind of, I know your information will be below, but like where they can find you and kind of what things
Sure.
they can find from you?
Yes. So I have a Facebook group which is called Rockabye Baby Sleep. That's the name of my sleep consulting agency. And then you can find me online. My website is rockabybabysleep.com. And I have a lot of sleep guides that I've created, and I sell those as well for the newborn stage, the infant stage, travel and sleep, navigating tricky spots like naps and regressions. Um, so, yeah, lots of different places to connect, and I hope that you'll reach out if you need support.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me and tackling this topic. And hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.